I woke up slowly, warmth pressing against my side and a heavy arm draped over my waist. My body didn't want to move. The heat, the comfort, the way everything felt so right, it made me want to stay exactly where I was. For a blissful second, I almost forgot where I was. Almost. Then my brain caught up, and everything slammed into focus. I'm naked. Oh God, I'm naked. And there's someone in bed with me. Asterisk. I peeled my eyes open and immediately regretted it. The room spun for a moment, my head pounding in protest. Too much alcohol. Way too much alcohol. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the nausea at bay, and then risked a glance at the person beside me. A guy. A really, really attractive guy. Blonde hair, long lashes, a strong jawline, the kind of face you'd expect to see on a magazine cover, not in your bed after a drunken night out. His arm tightened slightly around me, and he sighed in his sleep, like he didn't want me to leave. Panic flared in my chest. I need to get out of here. Now. Asterisk. Carefully, I slipped out from under his arm, grabbing the nearest piece of clothing I could find. My heart was racing, a mix of embarrassment, confusion, and something else I didn't want to name. What the hell had I done? As I searched for the rest of my clothes, fragments of the previous night started coming back. The party. The drinks. The guy. This guy. God, I slept with a stranger. Sneaking off so soon. A voice drawled behind me. I froze, one shoe halfway on, my heart pounding like a drum. Slowly, I turned around to find the guy sitting up, hair tousled and eyes half-lidded. He looked way too comfortable for someone who'd just woken up. Yeah, just heading out, I muttered, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. He grinned, an annoyingly perfect, lazy grin, and patted the spot on the bed beside him. Sit for a minute, I'll grab us some coffee. Before I could protest, he got up and wandered over to a small coffee maker on the dresser. I stood there awkwardly, debating whether to bolt or stay. My feet decided for me, refusing to move. Moments later, he handed me a cup, the smell of fresh coffee filling the air. You haven't changed much, he said, taking a sip of his own cup. I blinked, confused. What? Charlie, right, he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. We went to high school together. I stared at him, completely thrown. No way. I think I'd remember someone like you. His grin widened, and he leaned against the dresser, looking far too amused. Yeah, I looked a little different back then. Bigger. Bad hair. Braces. Ring a bell. It hit me like a freight train. Jack. I choked out. Bingo. My stomach twisted into a knot. Jack. My biggest school bully. And I just slept with him. God, this couldn't be happening. The next few days, I did my best to pretend that night never happened. I avoided the coffee shop near my dorm, skipped the usual lunchtime spots, and even started wearing earbuds everywhere to make myself look unapproachable. The last thing I needed was to run into Jack again. Just thinking about it made my skin crawl. But of course, the universe had other plans. Charlie, hey. I tensed at the sound of his voice, instantly recognizing that stupidly cheerful tone. I glanced over my shoulder, already regretting it. There he was, jogging up to me with that annoyingly perfect grin plastered on his face. What do you want, Jack? I asked, crossing my arms. Relax, just saying hi, he said, completely unfazed by my obvious irritation. You heading to class? I stared at him for a second, debating whether to lie. Yeah, cool. Mind if I walk with you? Without waiting for an answer, he fell into step beside me. I groaned internally. This was exactly what I didn't want, him acting like we were suddenly friends. But as much as I hated it, I couldn't help but notice how different he seemed now. Gone was the mean, sneering bully I remembered. This Jack was friendly. Too friendly. You don't have to do this, you know, I muttered, glaring at the ground. Do what? Whatever this is. Acting like we're cool. He chuckled, and it did something weird to my chest. Maybe I just want to get to know you. The real you. I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed quiet, hoping he'd get bored and leave. He didn't. By the next week, it was becoming clear that Jack wasn't going anywhere. Everywhere I went, he seemed to magically appear, at the library, in the cafeteria, even outside my dorm. It was like he had a sixth sense for tracking me down. We should hang out sometime, Jack said casually, leaning against the wall next to my locker. Why? I asked, genuinely baffled. You spent years making my life miserable. Why would I want to hang out with you? Jack's expression softened, and for a moment, he looked almost regretful. Look, I was a jerk back then. I know that. But people change. I've changed. I narrowed my eyes at him. So what? You think you can just apologize, and we'll be best friends? I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, he said, shrugging. But I'd like a chance to prove I'm not that guy anymore. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him to get lost, but another part of me, the part that was annoyingly curious, wondered if he was being serious. Could he really have changed? Before I could respond, Jack flashed me that infuriating grin again. Think about it, okay. And just like that, he walked off, leaving me standing there with way too many thoughts swirling in my head. A week later, I was still trying to wrap my head around everything. Jack kept showing up, and no matter how much I tried to push him away, he didn't seem to get the message. The weird thing was, I wasn't as annoyed as I thought I'd be. If anything, I was more confused than ever. You doing anything Friday night? Jack asked, sliding into the seat across from me at the cafeteria. Seriously? I groaned. Do you ever give up? Nope, he said with a wink. So, Friday. I rolled my eyes. Why are you even trying so hard? You hated me in school. Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. I didn't hate you, Charlie. I was an insecure idiot who didn't know how to deal with his own feelings. Doesn't excuse what I did, but I'm trying to make up for it now. My heart did a weird flip at his words, and I hated it. This was Jack. Jack, the guy who used to trip me in the hallways and call me names. But now he was sitting here, looking at me like I actually mattered. And the worst part, I didn't hate it. I'll think about it, I mumbled, grabbing my tray and standing up. That's all I ask, he said with a smile. As I walked away, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, Jack really had changed. And if he had, what did that mean for me? For us. Friday night rolled around faster than I expected. I still wasn't entirely sure why I agreed to this, but there I was, standing outside the movie theater, waiting for Jack. He showed up a minute later, hands shoved in his pockets, a grin plastered on his face. You actually came, he said, like he was genuinely surprised. Don't make me regret it, I muttered, earning a chuckle from him. We bought our tickets and headed inside. Jack insisted on getting popcorn, and somehow I ended up carrying it while he carried the drinks. We found our seats somewhere in the middle, and for a while, things were normal. Comfortable, even. Jack didn't try anything weird, he just watched the previews, occasionally throwing a comment my way that made me laugh despite myself. Halfway through the movie, our hands accidentally brushed in the popcorn bucket. I pulled mine back quickly, but Jack didn't seem fazed. Instead, he leaned closer and whispered, "Relax. It's just popcorn." I rolled my eyes but couldn't help the small smile tugging at my lips. For once, it felt like maybe we weren't two people with a messy past. Maybe we were just two guys hanging out. When the movie ended, Jack turned to me, eyes bright. Want to grab something to eat? And for the first time in forever, I didn't hesitate. Yeah, sure. Over the next couple of weeks, Jack and I started hanging out more. It wasn't planned, exactly, it just sort of happened. We'd grab coffee between classes, sit together in the library, or walk back to the dorms after lectures. It felt weirdly easy. The tension that had been there in the beginning started fading, replaced by something lighter. One afternoon, we ended up at the park near campus. Jack was sitting on the grass, leaning back on his hands, while I sat beside him, trying not to feel too self-conscious. See, I'm not so bad when you give me a chance, he said, grinning. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smiling back. You're tolerable, I guess. We stayed there for a while, talking about nothing in particular. It was nice, comfortable, and for once, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. But every now and then, a nagging voice in my head would remind me of who Jack used to be. Could I really trust him? Was this all some elaborate joke? I tried to push those thoughts away, but they lingered, making it hard to fully enjoy what was happening. It happened on a quiet evening. We were sitting on the steps outside my dorm, the campus unusually peaceful. The sky was painted in shades of deep orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. Jack had been unusually quiet, which wasn't like him at all. Everything okay? I asked, nudging him lightly. He looked at me, his green eyes reflecting the soft glow of the setting sun. For a moment, he didn't say anything, just stared like he was trying to memorize my face. Need to tell you something, he said, his voice low but steady. I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden seriousness in his tone. Okay. What is it? Jack took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. I like you, Charlie. More than I've ever liked anyone. And I know I don't deserve it, not after everything I put you through. But I've changed. I'm not that guy anymore. And I want a chance. A real chance to show you how much you mean to me. My heart pounded in my chest, each word sinking deeper than I expected. The air felt heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. He wasn't just saying it, he meant it. And that scared me. I don't know, Jack, I whispered, my voice barely audible. This is a lot. I know, he said softly, leaning just a little closer. I don't expect you to say anything now. Just think about it. Please. I nodded, unsure of what else to do. He gave me a small, hopeful smile, and somehow that made it harder. Because deep down, I knew part of me wanted to believe him. The next day, I met up with my friends at our usual spot in the cafeteria. They noticed right away that something was off. Okay, spill, Mia said, eyeing me suspiciously. What's going on? I sighed, knowing they wouldn't let it go. Jack. He said he likes me. Wants to be with me. Their reactions were immediate. Mia's eyes widened, and Ben looked like he wanted to throw his sandwich across the room. Charlie, you can't be serious, Ben said. That guy made your life hell in school. You really think he's changed? I don't know, I admitted, feeling more confused than ever. He seems different now. He's been nice. Nice doesn't erase years of bullying, Mia said gently. We just don't want you to get hurt again. I appreciated their concern, but it only made things more complicated. I didn't want to ignore Jack's feelings, but I couldn't ignore my friend's warnings either. Meanwhile, Jack didn't give up. He didn't push, but he didn't back off either. Instead, he kept showing up, bringing me coffee, helping me with assignments, even offering to walk me home when it got late. He was trying hard. Why are you doing this? I asked one evening as we walked back from the library. Because you matter to me, he said simply. I know I messed up before, but I want to make it right. I want to show you that I'm serious. His words made something in my chest ache. I wanted to believe him, but the fear of getting hurt again was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. I'm still thinking, I said, giving him a cautious glance. Jack smiled, not the cocky grin he usually wore, but something softer. That's all I need. And in that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, he really had changed. And maybe I was ready to give him a chance. After days of thinking, I finally made up my mind. I was going to give Jack a chance. It scared me, but there was something about him now that felt different. Maybe he really had changed. So, with my heart racing, I headed out to find him. As I walked across campus, I spotted him near one of the benches, talking to another guy. At first, it seemed like a normal conversation, but then Jack stepped closer, and the other guy looked uncomfortable. Jack said something I couldn't hear, and the guy shook his head, backing away quickly. My stomach twisted. I couldn't believe it. After all his promises, he was still the same. I turned around and left before either of them could see me. The hurt hit me harder than I expected. I'd almost let myself believe in him. Back at my dorm, I tried to push the whole thing out of my mind, but it lingered. How could I have been so stupid? I was just trying to get to my locker when Jack stepped right in front of me, his usual smile plastered on his face. Charlie, hey, wait, he called out, but I wasn't in the mood for any of it. I stared at him, arms crossed. What do you want, Jack? Still pretending to be some kind of changed person. He looked confused, but not for long. His eyes softened, like he was trying to figure out what I meant. Charlie, what are you talking about? I'm just trying to. Don't act like you're different, I interrupted, cutting him off. You'll never change, Jack. I know you too well. He froze for a second, like the words stung more than he expected. But then, without giving up, he stepped closer. Charlie, just listen to me for a second. No, Jack, I snapped, shaking my head. I'm done with this. Just stop acting like everything's fine. It's not. And it never will be. He opened his mouth, probably to say something else, but I turned away before he could. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear how he changed or wanted to help. All I knew was that he wasn't the same guy the first used to know, and I didn't have time for him. So I kept walking, ignoring his calls as I went. I was sitting by myself in the cafeteria, eating lunch, when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around, surprised to see it was the guy who had been bullied during the auditions, the one who always seemed on edge. I didn't know him well, but he seemed different today. Hey, Charlie, he said, shifting on his feet nervously. Jack's your friend, right? Have you seen Jack around? I frowned, not really expecting him to ask about Jack. Jack? No, I haven't. Why? Well, he paused, glancing around before lowering his voice a little. I really need to thank him. He helped me with my scene for the theater audition, and I got the role. Without him, I don't think I would have ever made it past the first round. I blinked. Jack helped him. That didn't sound like the Jack I knew. Wait, Jack actually helped you. When he nodded, grinning a little now, I felt a pang of guilt. Yeah, man. He gave me some tips, and he was so patient. Even showed me how to act my role as the antagonist. It all hit me at once. I remembered the day during the auditions when I thought Jack was just bullying the guy. He had been messing around, sure, but I realized now that he wasn't bullying him. He was acting, helping the guy get into character. God, I misjudged him. I couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Jack had been trying so hard to reach out to me, texts, calls, even random messages on social media. But I ignored all of it. Every time his name popped up on my phone, I just swiped it away. And he didn't stop. He kept calling, kept texting, always reaching out like nothing had changed. Maybe I misunderstood him all along. Maybe he really had changed. I needed to see him. Now, the moment the realization hit me, my heart started pounding. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to find him. I grabbed my stuff and rushed out of the cafeteria, not really knowing where I was going but needing to make it right. I couldn't just sit here and pretend like nothing had happened. I ran through the hallways, dodging students and rushing to the dorms. Jack's dorm was on the other side of the campus, so it felt like forever before I finally reached the building. My mind was racing. How could I have been so blind? Why hadn't I listened? Why had I pushed him away when all he had ever tried to do was help? I practically flew up the stairs, my breath coming in short gasps. When I finally reached his floor, I looked around frantically until I saw his door. I paused, took a deep breath, and knocked quickly, my heart hammering in my chest. After a moment, Jack opened the door. His eyes widened slightly when he saw me standing there. I could tell he wasn't expecting me. Hell, he probably wasn't even sure I'd ever come around. Charlie? He asked, his voice low, like he wasn't sure whether to be confused or relieved. I didn't wait for him to say anything more. I just stepped forward, barely thinking before I blurted out, Jack, I'm sorry. I was wrong about you. I misunderstood everything. You've been trying to help, and I messed up. I pushed you away when you were just trying to make things right. Jack's eyes softened. He didn't say anything right away, just stood there, looking at me, probably waiting for me to say more. Then, after what felt like a long pause, he let out a breath and gave a small, relieved smile. I figured you'd come around eventually, he said, his voice calm but with a hint of something else, maybe hope. I knew you didn't really mean it, Charlie. I didn't want to give up on you. I felt a mix of embarrassment and relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced with something warmer. I'm sorry for pushing you away. I was just angry, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I thought you were still the same, but I was wrong. Jack shook his head, moving closer. It's okay. I get it. You were hurt, and it's hard to see when things are changing. But I really have changed, you know. I've been trying, even if it didn't look like it. I know, I whispered, nodding, feeling a huge weight lifting off my chest. I can see it now. I just didn't want to admit I was wrong. Jack laughed softly, his eyes softening. Well, I'm glad you did. It's good to finally talk to you. I smiled at him, and before I even realized what I was doing, I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him in a tight hug. I could feel my heart racing, and I knew I had been so stupid for pushing him away when all he ever wanted to do was make things right. For a second, Jack stood frozen, probably surprised by the sudden move. But then he slowly wrapped his arms around me, holding me just as tightly. "You okay?" he asked softly, his voice gentle, like he was checking in. "Yeah," I whispered, holding him even tighter. "I'm okay now." He pulled back just a little, still holding me close, his gaze searching mine. There was something in his eyes, something soft, and it made my heart skip a beat. He didn't say anything, just seemed to wait for me, like he was asking for permission. I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything, but the answer was in my eyes. And then, slowly, Jack leaned in, his lips brushing against mine in a kiss that was soft and gentle. It was like he was making sure I wasn't going to pull away. But I didn't. I didn't want to pull away. I wanted to stay there forever, right in that moment where everything felt right for the first time in so long. The world felt perfect. After that day, Jack and I started dating. We took things slow, and honestly, it felt right. There were moments when doubts crept into my mind, old fears, old insecurities, but I learned to push them aside. I could see the change in Jack. He wasn't the same person he used to be. And neither was I. We were both better for it. Sometimes, I still worried. But every time I looked at him, I knew I was making the right choice. Jack had shown me he was trustworthy, kind, and patient. And more than anything, I wanted to be there for him, just like he had been there for me. Together, we were finally figuring things out.